Coming up next, join Pastor Roger Bradley for today's message from Church on the Rock in Pascagoula.
Over the past month, I've spent time watching videos about today's speaker. I've read much of his material. More importantly, I've listened to others talk about the impact that his message has had on their life. And as Chris said this morning in the early service, I got to feel that impact myself, and what a blessing. Let me just say that you're in for a treat and a blessing this morning by being here. Colonel Glenn Frazier is a World War II veteran. He's a survivor of the treacherous Bataan Death March and was a guest of the Emperor of Japan, a POW for 3.5 years. If we stop speaking right there, then we've said enough to honor him today. And we do honor you, sir. We thank you for being in our house today. Thank you for coming and being with us. The unique thing about him, though, is his message doesn't end with the history of the war, but rather it was what happened after the war that became his real message. Now, I have his biography here and could tell you a lot about that, but I've found out over time, if you really want to know something about a person, ask their spouse. This morning, his wife shared with me a little secret about him, that 70 years ago today, I found out he did not one little sin, but two. Number one, he ran away from home 70 years ago today. Number two, he told a lie. He lied to a recruiting officer about his age because he was not yet old enough to join the armed forces. But he told him that he was so he could enlist. And he spent many years defending our country and going through what many would call a hell on earth. And his story is compelling. And I would like for you to help me this morning welcome Colonel Glenn Frazier as he comes and speaks to us this morning.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, each and every one of you. And it is a great honor to me to be able to stand here today before you. In fact, when it's being 87, it's an honor just to be standing. You know, the soldiers are dying fast, the World War II soldiers. And I'm just blessed to be here. And it's true that what you said, I did tell a little lie, but I don't recommend it. I don't recommend it. I've surely paid for it, and dear time. I told them I was 21 when I was only 16. I think the thing that I rode up on a big old Harley and got off and told them I was 21 may have had some way of them believing it. They never checked it at all. An hour and a half later, I was sworn in and I was on my way. In fact, of business, I came first to Camp Shelby, Mississippi. That's where they sent me. And believe it or not, I got to Camp Shelby on the 4th of July. And I had a quarter in my pocket, and it cost a nickel to call Camp Shelby. And they said, "You're not due here till tomorrow." I said, "Well, I don't have another food, I don't have another a dinner or a food ticket. They say, well, that's just too bad. We'll pick you up in the morning. But they did have a little mercy and come down and pick me up that night, that afternoon. But anyway, I did, and I volunteered for the Philippine Islands. Europe, that didn't influence my decision, but they said I had three choices, and that was the Panama Canal, Alaska. Panama was too hot, Alaska was too cold, and the Philippines, he said, oh, it's a paradise. So I went over there, and it was great at first. The Filipino people couldn't have been nicer and more wonderful to us Americans if we call ourselves visitors. But we get over there, and I get the thing, start everything. My wing that I enlisted in went out on maneuvers the morning we got there, and 7 of us was taken over to the Philippine Department, which is USAF MacArthur's outfit, for housing until the wing got back. And that was, the 75th Ordnance was an old company. Been there ever since Pershing left the Philippines. And they had a big machine shop and everything. And the 7 of us were given a chance to join the 75th Ordnance. And they would send us, I didn't take any boot training when I was in the United States. Didn't go to boot camp. They sent me over there to do it at the 31st Infantry. And here these guys are out there just sweating and running and walking. And I didn't want any of that. I thought that was a good deal to get out of that. So I went to school for 5.5 months to become an ordnance officer at a Filipino base and be there and sign up to be in the Philippines for 3 years. And I enjoyed what I saw. I enjoyed some of the places I went. And I went to Python's Den up on Marvelous Mountain. We had a guide. We went deep sea fishing. We went to some places that a white person had never been before. And in Manila, we greeted the Japanese Navy with a good welcome message. We go down to the Mayaka bar and get some beer for a dime a glass, and they come down there and they had one of those juke boxes that you had keys on it, and we put a 10 centavo in there to get a record played, and they come up there, the sailors would, and flip up that and punch down that button saying, yang, 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 yang. So we got real upset about it. So the welcome that we gave them was with our fist. We tore that place up twice because they did that to us. But I never hated. I came from a family that never taught me to hate anybody. And that didn't cross my mind. But I came at first maybe a dislike for the Japanese. But anyway, the war started in Europe way before the 1941. And everything, all of us was getting very patriotic and everything, and I thought maybe, and I sort of wanted to see the world too. I thought I had to see the world, and I thought that'd be a good start. I'd be paid for going over there. Anyway, the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor on the 7th of December, a Sunday morning. And we were on the other side of the international date line, so it was the 8th for us. And most people don't know that the Japanese dive bombers, heavy bombers from Formosa hit us on the 8th, 6 hours later. And I'm not trying to take anything away from Hawaii, but they killed 2,500 in Hawaii, and everybody in the world knew that. But they killed 6,000 in the Philippines, and nobody knew that, because USAF headquarters would not let the information out. And the war strategy was by reinforcing Corregidor, and by maybe the enemy was coming by sea. Very little effort was put in the plans in case of war about them coming by airplane. But they came from Formosa, hundreds of them, in several different the first day formations. And they bought Clark Field, Nichols Field, Canadian Navy Base, and Corregidor. And USAF headquarters did not allow our planes to get off the ground at a vital time, and 90% of our fleet was destroyed. All of the B-17s that was there was destroyed. Most all of the P-40s, just about 4 or 5 left, and some of the other aircraft. And on the 14th, the 14th Army of the Japanese Army, which was one of their best, came ashore at Lingayen Bay approximately the 23rd of December. And instead of sending the 31st Infantry or a good defense, USAF sent the Philippine Army. That was ill-trained and ill-planned, or some of them hadn't been in the Army long enough to even take any training at all. My job when the war started was given me be in charge of all ammunition moving to and from the front lines. And when I got up there the 4th day, they were about 20 miles inland. The Japanese just walked in, and most of the Filipinos' army was shooting blank ammunition. They didn't even know enough of it. As long as it popped, they thought it was live. And now when I got there, they said, we shoot those rascals 10 or 15 times. They don't fall. And I said, yeah. Well, I looked at the ammunition. They went out to Fort William McKinley and loaded truckload after truckload of blank ammunition or practice ammunition and went up there. But anyway, the Japanese made their advance, and we were ordered to retreat to Bataan. And Bataan was a peninsula that went down next to the China Sea, Manila Bay, and Corregidor. And that was a good plan to retreat there because it was less area to protect. But we fought them with savage fighting. I can remember the first day that the bombers came down the Manila Bay, and we was out in Bataan, a bunch of us, and we went out to a clearing where we could look over at Corregidor because we knew that they were coming that way. And we stood there and watched them bomb Corregidor. And one of their bombers was shot down and went down in the Manila Bay. And that was like a football game to us, man. We were happy as we could be. We were clapping our hands and hollering. When it was over and we went back to our compound, which was in the jungle, Sergeant Mahoney, our mess sergeant, he said he was just going to sit there and have a cup of coffee. Well, when we got back, he had a little monkey about that big, gray monkey, sitting right in front of him, about 3 foot in front of him. And we asked him, said, where'd you get him? He said, well, when the first bomb started, he came down out of the tree, jumped up on the table here, and I have been dressed down, and dressed every way by a drill sergeant, but not like that monkey. He told me, he sat down and said, ying, 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 as long as the bomb was falling. He said, I've never been able to put a hand on him. Well, to make a long story short, he became our warning. He could hear the planes before we did. If you went to the foxhole, you could never get in the foxhole ahead of him. The planes was coming from that way, he was there on that side of the foxhole. Coming that way, he was there. He knew, he picked it up. He got so good he could tell the difference between a few P-40s that was left and the Japanese planes. Well, we fought those rascals for 4 months. A savage fight. We didn't have any relief as far as food was concerned. We never got one, the front lines never got one can of salmon or fish or peas or beans from their stash over on Corregidor. I'm not trying to badger the guys that was on Corregidor. They were wonderful Americans just like we were. But the system was set to where we wouldn't get anything. We were supposed to hold off until we got reinforcements. And on the 11th of March, 1942, General Douglas MacArthur left us, and that was doomsday as far as we were concerned. And he left us and went to Australia. Well, we knew what we had to do. And we lasted another month. And the Japanese had planned to take the Philippines in 2 months and then go on to the 14th Army, go on to Australia. But they did not get to go to Australia. What we did held them up there long enough that the Americans got to Australia first. And as a result of that, they tried to get a beachhead established at the end of Bataan on their master plan and cut us in two. And if they had, General Douglas MacArthur would have been captured and they wouldn't have gotten away. But anyway, it was a savage fight. I was at the front lines nearly every day, and I saw a lot of things happen. And I want to tell you, I had to pray a lot, and I had a lot of reasons to, because I started hating the Japanese. I never hated anybody like I hated those people, and if I had a book and I was writing a book about hate, I'd have one page filled up every day. I'd have 1,285 days of hate in that book about everything every day that they did. Sometimes we never knew what to expect. We were captured by a group of people. We didn't even know how to talk to them. We didn't understand them, and they didn't understand us. But we did give them we were lost the battle, but we did succeed in holding them long enough that the Americans got to Australia, and they didn't go any further. They were tied up there. And when General King took over after General Wainwright went over to Corregidor, after MacArthur left, he was one of our favorite generals. And General MacArthur called General Wainwright and says, "Fight to the last man." He said, "Sir, you don't understand." He said, "You don't understand. This is an order. If you don't fight to the last man, I'll court-martial you when this is over with." So General King received the message from General Wainwright, and he said, "Sir, I received the order, and if you and I are living at the end of this war, I will see you in military court, because I am surrendering tomorrow morning." They didn't know that General King had received a message from General Homer, the Japanese general, that he had the reinforcements to take us, and if we didn't surrender in 2 days, he was going to come in and kill every living soul in Bataan, and that would have been 65,000 Filipinos, approximately 15,000 Americans, and 38,000 old men, women, and children that they let come down and get in the war zone. So we were surrendered and was told to go to a certain place. For my particular place I had to go was to Marvelis, and that was at the end of Bataan. Any of you who have been over there, you might know that. So I marched 6 days and 7 nights, and no food, no water, no sleep. Just constant march 90 miles. And I saw all the atrocities that they did. Well, not all of them that they did, but what they did, how they did. If you reached over to touch your partner or a friend or fellow soldier that was having trouble, they would shoot or bayonet both of you. If you tried to break and get water at those artesian wells, they would kill you. They'd shoot you. I saw them burying Americans alive. And actually, that was a very heartening thing for me. And I already hated them, so that death march made me hate them a lot more. I may have had more than 1,285 pages in my book with that. But we marched. The ones of us that could make it, made it, and went to Camp O'Donnell. There were 15,000 Americans that started the march, and only we lost 3,000 and 2,500 more at Camp O'Donnell right after that. Out of that 15,000 original count, there was only 4,000 came home, and 10% of those died in the first 5 years. And really, believe it or not, the main cause of death was automobile accidents, drunken driving. And we went to Japan, and I went on a small freighter, 50 men on it, went to Osaka, Japan, and got all the orders that they had to give us. But I was in 5 slave labor camps. One that I didn't mention was back in the Philippines at the Taos Road Detail. But I was in 5 slave labor camps doing all kinds of work, working in factories, working in foundries, at shipyards, railroad lines, loading trains, unloading trains, digging ditches, or whatever they had for us. They had us on a rice diet, and that was a bowl of rice in the morning, and a rice ball at lunch, and a bowl of rice at night, and plus what we could steal, if we could find anything to steal. We became rogues. We could steal anything. We steal any wrench they had and throw it away, or throw it in our benjo. We'd steal so much stuff. We stole so much stuff in Osaka that we had the benjo full. And they beat us, and unruly, they beat us every time they got a chance. They hated Americans. And they had no no rule against killing one of us. The guards that they brought in to guard us, every 2 weeks it changed. And they brought in guys, and when our army sends somebody for R&R, they get some recreation. And they really don't have any duty. But they come in and they'd have to pull duty for 2 weeks at the camp we were in. And it was nothing unusual for the new guard to come along and empty a whole barracks at 2 o'clock in the morning out in the parade ground and beat every one of us and maybe kill 1 or 2 or 3 of them. That was not unusual. So that brutality kept going. I'd like to tell you one of the things I didn't mention this morning. I'd like to tell you I had a wisdom tooth that was infected. Took me about 4 months to get me to a dentist. When I got in there in his office, he walked in, a little fellow, small fellow, and he jumped up in and grabbed my mouth and opened it up, told me to open it, and I opened it, and he looked in there, and he reached over there. He had, like a glass shelf, and all of his tools on that glass shelf had water circles around it, so I knew they hadn't been sterilized or anything. He grabbed a knife without any deadening and cut around my tooth and grabbed it with one of those forceps, and he pulled and wrestled with it and couldn't get it out. He finally wound up on the chair with me, 1 foot on the platform down there and one on the arm, and used my jaw as lever. Out come the tooth. Well, instead of, he didn't do anything except just tell me to get out. And I said, "You have dislocated my jaw. You've knocked my jaw out of joint." He said, "You go back to your camp." So 6 hours later, the guards come and got me and took me in there in the shack. And I laid down on the floor. They told me to lay down on the floor. One got laid on the floor, was there, able to put his boots up against my head. And another guy laid down and kicked me on my jaw 6 times. I don't know which one knocked it back in, but that's the way they did it. Now, that's why I call my book Hell's Guest, because they said we was guests of the emperor. I didn't never dream that they'd treat us that way, but that's some things they did. I was working, and it was cold. That was the first winter I was up there, and it was cold, 8 degrees at times, and I cut my hand here on my knuckles, It was so cold it wouldn't even bleed. So on the way in, I put my hands in my pocket. I had a flimsy pair of khaki pants on and a khaki shirt. And we all of us had put cement sack paper in it to help break the wind. So the guard told me to take my hands out of my pocket. And I did, and when we got inside, the guard inside pointed me out, and they pulled me into the little clubhouse they had there, and told me the interpreter was there and the major was there, and the guard took me in there with a rifle in my back, and the interpreter said, "You were walking down the streets of Osaka, Japan, with your hands in pockets." I said, "Yeah, I was cold." I told him about my hand, and I said, "I'm freezing. I don't have a coat or anything," and I was trying to stay as warm as I could. Had to work all day in a lumber yard with that in that condition. And he says, "You broke all rules and regulations that you have to abide by." And I started arguing with him. And the major over there hit his fist on the desk and said something. And he said, "He's going to execute you." He had told me to get everybody out there and stand and watch, and they're going to show that you have to obey orders. And I said, "Even if I don't know what the order is?" He said, "That's right." That's how unreasonable they were. So he got me out there, and I'm standing there in front of him, and he put that saber to my neck, sort of nicked me. And they wanted me to cry and beg, and I didn't. I refused to. When I got out there, I had a feeling of despair and so forth, but I didn't have it long, because I guess God gave me the hopes that I had, that I just changed. And I said, "Well, I'll be glad I'm out of here, and I'll be out of all this torture and be on my way, which one way or the other." So anyway, God intervened. And I sit there and I told him that God gave me the words. And in fact, the words are backed up by Scripture in the Bible. It's Matthew 10:19 and Mark 13:11. Where if you're in that type of situation and unjust, the Holy Ghost will give you the words to say. I said to him, I said, "He can kill me, but he cannot kill my spirit." And I was looking straight at him. I didn't take my eyes off of him. And I said, "He can kill me, but he can't kill my spirit. And my spirit's going to lodge in his body and haunt him until the day he dies." He sort of had a little frown on, but not much. And the interpreter asked me to say it again, and I said it again and added, and if there's plenty of Americans coming, and if any Japanese is killed an American for an unjust cause, they will have his spirit in their body haunting them until they die. He frowned and pulled his saber back and put me in solitary confinement for 7 days and 7 nights. Now, he thought that would kill me. Well, it did kill me. I had one little bit of sip of water in a bottle and one little rice ball for 7 days and 7 nights in a 5 by 5 by 5 hole in total darkness. I couldn't even know. I didn't even know where I was, what I was, or what. In fact, I couldn't even figure out who I was. I got very low because what we were eating was not nourishable food and so forth. And finally, he opened the door. They opened the door on a bright, sunny day, and I couldn't see. I was just blinded. And I tried to get up, stand up, and I put my hands up on the rim of the hole in the ground. And this guard stomped my fingers, stomped my hands, so I pulled him back. And then he reached down there and grabbed me and pulled me out on the ground, face down. And he started kicking me, hit me in the back of the head with a rifle butt, knocked me unconscious. He broke 3 ribs on the right side and kicked me over and everything, broke 2 ribs on the left side. Well, I kept trying to get to the barracks, and I got close enough, and the guy came out and pulled me in. Now, if you'd been through all of that, any of you, would you think you'd hate the Japanese? I don't believe there'd be anybody in here who wouldn't. So my hatred grew. It grew to the point to where it affected every aspect of my life there. And I got to a point that we talk about our freedom and our flag, that the Old Glory, I love Old Glory. And we got to the point where some of us was more desirous of getting freedom than we were food. And we were hungry all the time. And I'll have to confess, I like to tell a little lie there. Because the last 8 months, we was in a place that we were unloading rice, soybeans, and dried fish. And it was like a POW cafeteria, but it was raw. And if they caught you with something in the mouth, they'd beat you, so you had to swallow it, regardless of how much you'd sort of got on it, okay, and chewed it. But my hatred went on and on and on and on. And I got to the point to where I hated them with beyond anything that you can imagine. And I won't tell you all, I didn't mention this morning, I'm going to tell you all how I got out of there. Everybody was told that the Americans would be shot in the event that the Americans or the Allied forces landed on their land. They would be executed. That was common knowledge. Well, the interpreter came by and said, they dropped a bomb today on Hiroshima. And if you were sitting 75 miles away, you'd be petrified. The city was completely destroyed, killed thousands of people. And so he said, in the morning, I'll be back in the morning. So he came back the next morning and got 326 of us, and instead of going to work, we went to a rice field, big rice field. And here comes 2 trucks about the time we got there. One truck, the first truck had 16 soldiers and 4 machine guns on it. They got out and they set a machine gun at all 4 corners, and 4 men were standing at each machine gun. The second truck had picks and shovels, 10 soldiers. So they told us that we had to dig our own grave. They wanted it 6 foot long, 4 foot deep, and 2 foot wide in 2 days. Well, now, if you was digging your own grave, how much would you dig? We had every trick in the book trying to get rid of, to keep from digging that grave. The Jap would come, jump in there and shovel a big bunch of stuff out and said, that's the way to do it. The minute he left, we'd look and watch him and we'd pull it back in. At the end of the 2-day deadline, nobody had over 15 inches. And they were beating us and banging us. And, of course, the good Lord intervened again. Well, we had a guy that had an epileptic fit. And they asked, what in the world's wrong with him? And we said it's a highly contagious tropical disease. And they said, man, put him in. And they put him in this isolation. Well, that night we stayed up with about a little bit of light, and a whole bunch of us was practicing how to do an epileptic fit. So the next day, 10 guys was in that room with that guy. The next day after that, about 20 more. And we were trying to get out of there because the bombers was moving, B-29 was moving closer every night. We could hear them. And we was in Moji. And we just knew it was time that they were going to blow us up because we was inside of a building with big smokestacks all around us and an air zero assembly plant right close to us. So that's what we used mainly for stopping our digging, or where we couldn't dig. We would faint, we would get kicked, we'd get beat, and we'd do everything in the world that they could. So they got real nervous. The third morning we went out there, and here was, would you believe, a great big bulldozer Now that just told us that they was going to dig a big grave and put us all in it and shoot us. So that I started going again. We'd faint, we'd stop, we'd get beat and everything. So when the whistle blew for 12 o'clock, we were normally the other 2 days we went in. They didn't take us in, and we were sort of concerned that they'd start shooting us right then. But later on, a guy rode up on a bicycle, and told them something, and they took us in. Now, there was some guys in our group that was in the aircraft artillery, or no, it's not called that, but from New Mexico, Coast Artillery. And they were trained in that. He heard something when the interpreter come and said, 5 minutes, fall out and go back out there. Well, he heard something, and he goes outside and runs back in there, and he said, man, there's a B-29 coming about 15,000 or 20,000 feet high maybe. And he said, if they've got one of those big bombs, we out of here, we're gone. And so I went outside and laid down like a lot of them in the fenced-in area. And there was a big factory, a textile factory, right next door to us. And they dropped a 2,000 bomb right on that factory, right in the middle, killed about 1,400 people, I mean. But about 4,000 people worked there, I think. And we had to go over there and clean out and everything, help them get the dead out and get the debris out so they could get the injured out. And the next morning, the interpreter came and said that there has been another big bomb dropped on Nagasaki, and that we are not going out, and that the Emperor will talk at 2 o'clock tomorrow, and there could be a truce because they all talking about a truce. And that's what brought us. That's why I'm here today. Otherwise, they would have killed me, shot me. Now, in all of this, we as a group of Americans suffered through it, took all the beatings we could. We lost a lot of men and everything, but our hate just run rampant. We had to do certain things to keep them from beating us, but in fact, when I landed at Okinawa, I said, you give me a tank, I'll go back up there and kill every one of them. That's the way I felt. Now, I come back home for a royal welcome, but in a few months, I started having nightmares. And these nightmares continued for 30 years. And I could not allow myself to even touch a Japanese car, much less get in it and ride. If I had to go somewhere with riding a Japanese car, I just wouldn't go. I'd walk first. I hated them. Now, if you had gone through something like this, of starvation, killing of our Americans, see them died and slaughtered and everything else and beaten and banged around, would you have any hate for them? I think you would. Now, I'm not talking about that type of hate today here, but I'm talking about that's the way I hated them. I'm talking about any hate. And now, I have gotten rid of my hate. I want to tell you a little something. Terry came home one night and said she's going to buy a Toyota. And I said, you going to what? I'm going to buy a Toyota. I said, where you going to park it? I said, you can't park it here. Well, we finally decided to get a Saturn. And that was the biggest piece of junk we ever had. Every time it'd break down, she said, see, if I had my Toyota, it wouldn't be this way. But my hatred run rampant. I had nightmares. My relationships with pretty much anybody could not thrive if I didn't find out that they hated the Japanese the same as I did. The news media and St. Petersburg run quite a few articles on me, and I was the Tampa Bay treasurer in 1999. And I called the lady over at the newspaper in St. Pete and told her when I was getting close to getting some of this done, getting rid of the hate, if she would come down to the Honda place Monday morning at 9 o'clock, she could see me kissing a Honda. But I had trouble getting rid of it. And while I was struggling with that and over a period of time, everybody knew pretty much about what was happening to me and had all the sympathy they could give me. And we had a place in Lydian, well, I say we had a place. We went to a place called the American on Fire for God. And Dr. Sandy was the owner of the place and had a group of people coming in, young people from all over the world, to learn to be better not Americans, but better Christians and missionaries and preachers. And it just so happened that my book came out about the same time, and I was talking about all this stuff in there about the Japanese, and it had a little Japanese girl there from Okinawa, and Terry said that he asked God, he couldn't say what her name was, told her to call her Sunshine, and that's what we called her, Sunshine. So they were going to disband and all go home on a certain day, and the night before they went, they cooked everybody that helped anyway volunteering there, they would cook a dinner for them, and we'd all be in attendance. So they didn't say much to her about my book, but she asked Dr. Sandy, could she do something for me that night? And Dr. Sandy said yes, didn't even tell her what it was or didn't ask her. So when we got there, they put me in the middle of the room in a chair, and all these people got around us. And she came, and she left and went into the restroom and came out with a pail of water. I'm sitting in the chair. She took my shoes and socks off and washed my feet and started praying for the Japanese to forgive and to repent for what they did to us Americans. It wasn't a dry eye in the house. But I think that was part of the end of this whole thing of me getting rid of the hatred, because I could see then that I had to get rid of it. And you know, if any of you have any hatred, I don't care what kind, a little bit or not, I tell you right now, you ought to get rid of it. You ought to look in the mirror and analyze yourself. In fact, the business, I had to do it every day for a long time, 2.5 years. I talked to myself, looking in the mirror, and I was talking to God. And it will multiply. It got to the point with me that I could not even go to sleep without taking some kind of medicine, sleep pills or whatever. That's how bad it was. And in Jesus' writings of the Bible, it gives you the message that you have to ask for forgiveness. It's a major requirement to get into heaven. And if you do not forgive yourself and whoever you're holding grudges against, you won't make it. Jesus said, if you don't, our Heavenly Father will not forgive you. What did Jesus say the last thing when he was dead, dying on the cross? He said, forgive them, Father, for they know not what they're doing. Now, if anybody knows what's going on, he did. Won't you agree? So let's go from that to saying, I got home to a loving family and so forth, but I soon had to get away I could not tell my family what I was going through. I couldn't tell anybody that I knew the secrets of it. The VA files were sealed. They wasn't anything there that they would tell anybody. But I had 30 years of struggling and a life that wasn't worth living. I was free. I saw that flag flying, American flag flying. I called it Old Glory, flying on top of the Grand Hotel in Okinawa, Japan, where General MacArthur's headquarters was. There was 21 of us took off and went out all the way and rode a train 500 miles and found out where his headquarters was and turned ourselves in. And when we saw that flag, man, I'll tell you right now, the chill bumps went up and down me. And the flag that we had in the Philippines, in Bataan, we buried it, but nobody in America never got back to get that flag. And the first thing I saw in the picture that's on the front of my book is the second day of the march, and I had just looked up and saw that flagpole that we had flying a Japanese flag and our flag on the ground. Now, why do I value the flag as much as the amount that I do? Because it represents the freedom of this country. It represents the stature of our country. In other words, without some symbol, where would we be? And I have been a slave myself in my lifetime, and I take it now, I look at it as a blessing because it humbled me. It made me a different person. I wouldn't run away from home for nothing now. But it made me a humble person. And without forgiveness of my hate, I would be nothing. And I could accomplish nothing. My wife and I travel a lot, talking to people, but I never have much opportunity, haven't had up until the present time, to talk to congregations like you. I have talked to a larger congregation, but not have the liberty to go and say what I want to say. I want to tell you something. I was talking to the mental health department of the VA in Biloxi, Mississippi, and they had it on closed circuit TV to all the other places in the southeast. And I was talking, and when they asked me what was wrong, what I thought was wrong, or what about the mental health department, I said, well, you took the preacher, you took God out of the program. And that's why you're having so much problem. And did you know 5 psychiatrists get up and walked out? I could care less as far as I'm concerned. But that's what they did. Now, I understand that they are putting chaplains back in. But let me tell you, a nurse told my wife that the ACLU had a lot of influence over the VA, was running that part of the program, telling them what to do. Now, I am an American. I put in my time, and some of the people here, all these veterans have put in our time. I didn't go over to when the war started, I didn't say that I wasn't going to fight for my country. I fought. Everybody that puts on that uniform will have to do what they're told. But I love my country, and I would do anything that I had to keep it free. And I hope that we all look at what we're doing today. We are having a problem that there are people out there in this world that will completely destroy our freedom. And I say we have to be strong to protect it with whatever it takes. And I'm going to leave that. Do we have time for any questions? We don't. Okay. I want to thank everybody for me being here this time and being able to talk to you.